Today from the global lane, Trump lifts sanctions on Syria and makes history by meeting with the Syrian president. But can the former Al-Qaeda operative be trusted?
If you just look at his history, I don't know that you can trust him as far as you could throw him.
Major sticking points in reaching peace in Ukraine. The role Donald Trump and Turkey President Erdogan may play to bring the two sides together.
Turkey tried to prevent the war, and they have the confidence of both leaders. And that's why it's the natural place. But you have to give the credit to President Trump.
Trump signs deals with Gulf state Arabs. But how close is a final trade deal with China?
At least we know President Trump is willing to bring the tariffs down, which I think is a real key. We're at a trade war, really, with China, and it'll be interesting to see how this all nets out in 90 days.
And this Memorial Day, returning to Vietnam. Former enemies now peaceful and prosperous, 50 years after the war. And it's all right here on the global lane. During his trip to Saudi Arabia, President Trump made an astonishing announcement about Syria.
And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East, I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
And the president said the United States, for the first time in more than 10 years, will take steps to normalize relations with Syria. Later, the U.S. president held a historic meeting with new Syria President Ahmed al-Shara, also known as al-Jilani. It was the first time in more than 25 years that an American president had met with a Syrian leader. But can al-Jilani, a former al-Qaeda operative and ISIS member, be trusted? President Trump suggested he wants to give him a chance to stabilize Syria.
The sanctions were brutal and crippling and served as an important function, nevertheless, at the time. But now it's their time to shine. It's their time to shine. We're taking them all off, and they're going to have, I think they're going to have, based on the people and the spirit and everything else that I'm hearing about. So I say good luck, Syria. Show us something very special like they've done, frankly, in Saudi Arabia. Okay, they're going to show us something special. Very good people. Everywhere we can, my administration is pursuing peaceful engagement, offering a strong and steady hand of friendship to all that will take it in good faith.
Earlier, I talked with CBN News contributing correspondent Chuck Holton, who recently returned from Syria. I asked him about Israel's concern for the Syrian Druze and secret talks with al-Jilani's HDS government. Chuck, why are the Israelis so concerned about the Druze?
Well, I would call it enlightened self-interest. There's very good reasons for them to support the Druze if the Druze are going to be against the more extremist elements in Syria. And the Druze have kind of an affinity for Israel. And the Druze in Israel live much better lives than the Druze in Syria do. And so the Syrian Druze are looking at that and saying, we want to align ourselves more with Israel. They would love nothing more than to become a sort of self-governing protectorate of Israel. And if Israel could do that, or at least solidify their relationship with the Druze in southern Syria, that would form a nice buffer zone that would keep out those more extremist elements, keep them from being able to approach and attack Israel at the Golan Heights.
And many of those Syrian Druze are from southern Syria near the Golan Heights. Mm-hmm. That's the place where al-Jilani, the Golani, al-Shara is from, the leader of HTS. So do you think he may be, obviously he'd be familiar with them? Would he be friends with them? Would he protect them? Can he be trusted to protect them?
Well, if you just look at his history, I don't know that you can trust him as far as you could throw him. And it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the people in Syria think. And those people, I just came back from there, talking to people in Syria. I didn't find one person who thought it was a good thing that he's leading what remnants of the country now.
And even Islamists are saying that.
That's right. Even Arabs, even Muslims are saying that we would never vote for that guy. And so he has managed to strong-arm his way into power. The concerning thing is that so many Western countries are falling over themselves to try to legitimize that strong-arming. And that's not the way that, a representative democracy works. So we shouldn't be encouraging that in any way, shape, or form. Now, I think everybody just wants to see some form of stability come back to Syria. And indeed, they've had about 600,000 people that have come back to Syria since December, since Giuliani took over. But when I talked to people who are living in Manbij and places that have been taken over by either the SNA or the HTS forces, they will tell you they are instituting Sharia law. And they're trying to, rename Syria to the Syrian Arab Republic. Well, it's not an Arab country. There are Arabs there, but there are lots of other groups there, like the Druze, like the Yazidis, like the Christians, who don't want to be part of the Syrian Arab Republic. They want to have a representative republic that allows them some measure of autonomy. And that's really the only way that they will be safe, because, as my friend Michael Yon likes to say, some fish don't swim together in the same pond very well. And so they need to be given their own ponds to swim in. And the only way to do that is to sort of balkanize Syria to an extent.
Well, do you see that happening? Do you think that's going to happen? The balkanization?
I mean, I think that's probably the most likely outcome. It's going to be bloody. There's no question about that. None of those entities are going to freely give up what they now control. And the more concerning thing is that all of these extremist elements, the Islamic extremist elements, are some facet of ISIS. And so you could call Syria right now the United Nations of ISIS, because whether it's HTS or the Syrian National Army or the actual ISIS elements in the country, all of them hold those same ideologies, and they all hate each other because they don't think that this guy is zealous enough or whatever. But if something happens to unify all of those elements, they'll be pretty much unstoppable as long as they're still backed up by Turkey.
Well, why then is Israel talking with HTS?
Well, I think they're hoping to keep that from happening. I think what they want to do is try to make some overtures to Giuliani specifically and say, if you're serious about what you're saying to the Western world, which is that you want to create a representative democracy, you want to create a progressive state in Syria, then, okay, we'll get behind that. But you've got to give us some guarantees for our own safety. And, oh, by the way, we're not going to give up the land that we've taken in southern Syria. That's going to be a buffer zone for perpetuity at this point.
Well, we'll see how this all fleshes out. I'm sure you'll be back there in the days ahead, but we appreciate you. Thank you. Keep up the good reporting.
My pleasure.
Finally, talking peace. After more than 3 years of fighting, Ukraine and Russia have begun negotiations to end the war. President Trump wants the bloodshed to end and a just and lasting peace negotiated. But that's easier said than done. Joining us, a geopolitical analyst, Bill Ganasti. Mr. Ganasti is a Turkish-American film producer who worked for 15 years as a Turkish press officer at the United Nations. Bill, it's a pleasure having you with us. So President Trump has praised Turkish President Erdogan as a great host of these peace talks. So why Istanbul, and what difference does having Erdogan in this process make to reaching an agreement?
Erdogan and Turkey was the only country that was accepted by both Ukraine and Russia during their war. Turkey tried to prevent the war, and they have the confidence of both leaders. And he has the confidence, and Turkey has the confidence of both country and leaders. And that's why it's the natural place. But you have to give the credit to President Trump, because he is involved with this process, both publicly and privately.
Well, let's talk a little specifics here, because it seems the Russian president wants everything without making concessions. He wants Crimea, maybe keeping Donbass, other areas of Ukraine that Russia doesn't currently occupy. Also, no NATO membership for Ukraine, probably oil and gas pipeline rights. So how do they reach a deal under those terms?
If we go back to what was the circumstances when President Trump was in power and what transpired during the Biden administration, then, of course, Russian President Putin will start demanding the most at this time after all this, what went through last 4 years. And from that perspective, this is a negotiation point. They are going to sit down and negotiate. At the end, they will decide on the current conditions. Unfortunately, 4 years passed, lots of bloodshed, and this is where we are. This is a reality of today.
And Bill, no one's talking about the return of 20,000 Ukrainian children forcibly trafficked to Russia during the war, or about war reparations, war crimes. So how important are those issues to a lasting peace?
Well, time will take place for these wounds to be closed. We cannot, no one can expect that everything to be resolved from one meeting. First, they have to agree on a lasting peace, and then they have to put down the issues that they have to further negotiate. And with the help of President Trump and with the help of President Erdogan, they are the two good, acceptable leaders to help two leaders of Ukraine and Russia and to resolve these problems over a long period of time.
On another matter, Bill, affecting the Kurdish militia, the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, says it's disbanding after 40 years of struggle against Turkey. So President Erdogan called it a historic development, a crossing of a critical threshold in the process of a terror-free Turkey. So, like Turkey, the United States has designated the PKK a terrorist group. So what will this mean for Turkey and especially the security of the Kurds in northern Syria and Iraq?
Well, nobody, there's no place for terror. Terror started in Turkey by forces in 1980. In that area. And we don't have time, and there's no reason to go into the details of that thing, who started, why it started, how it started. It's good that it is ending. And when there is no, well, we are talking about a terrorist organization, right? PKK, everybody accepts it. And organization itself is dismantling and ending its, journey. And that tells us that something positive is taking place. These problems are the problems of the past, and it's about time that they ended, whether it is terrorism, whether it is war, whether the trade, the tariffs is going to bring a new order, fair trade, like the president say, equalize everything, prices, and all these things are modernity, where we are going, instead of remaining in the relics of past times. What Clinton, Bush, and Biden and Obama administrations represented. They lived in the past. President Trump lives in the future. He tried to live in the future when he was a 45th president. They didn't allow him. They came up with all kinds of legal whatnots. And now, in the past 4 years, they created these two wars, one in Israel, one in Ukraine. And so, to answer your question, PKK, I'm coming back to how it started, why it is ending. The wars are going to end. How did the Pakistan-India war suddenly flared up, and how did it end quickly? So they are all related. So you have to put it from that perspective, not just what's happening in Turkey, around Turkey, but it is good for the entire planet.
Well, let's pray that it is relief and peace for the Kurds in northern Syria and also in Iraq. Filmmaker, geopolitical analyst Bill Ganasti. Thank you, Bill, for sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Working trade deals. President Trump believes his trip to the Middle East will bring at least $1 trillion in Gulf state investments for the United States. Just before he departed the White House for Saudi Arabia, Trump announced a 90-day agreement with China, pausing the imposition of hefty tariffs while a final, more favorable trade deal is negotiated. Here to discuss more on tariffs, Trump's trip, and trade is businessman, former Congressman Jim Renacci. He currently serves as Republican Party chair for Medina County, Ohio. President Trump's trip to the Middle East is all about generating business for the United States, and he signed a deal with the Saudis worth about $600 billion. So what do you make of this trip and Trump's art of the deal at work?
Well, look, I've gotten to know President Trump. I was one of the first people to support him in 2015 and 16 here in Ohio. He's a business guy. That's really the base of where he enjoys doing. He enjoys being there, making deals. And at the same time, he's going to be able to make those deals and bring America manufacturing and business back. And I think that's the real goal, is to really make America great again, which is slogan, and bring some of the foreign government money, foreign government investment, but also business investment from those foreign countries here to the United States.
I mean, $600 billion from the Saudis, that's quite a bit, and the Israelis are a bit concerned that he's excluding them, making deals with the Gulf states against their interests. It appears Trump's saying, we're still with you, Israel, but this is between the U.S. and the Gulf states, America first. So what do you think is the reason for Israel to be concerned? Is there a reason? How far are we from bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords with Israel?
Well, look, I don't think Israel should be concerned. I still know that President Trump's a big supporter of Israel, and I do believe, even in serving in Congress, that Americans are really very supportive, most Americans, because it is one of the few democracies in that region. It's one of the few countries that we actually get intellectual intelligence back and forth with. It's a good, solid ally, and I don't think they have any fears, and it's really a business relationship that President Trump is trying to build outside of the relationship we already have with Israel.
Well, Trump is optimistic about reaching a final agreement more favorable to the United States. China is still denouncing the United States publicly. President Xi Jinping appears more negative about a final trade agreement. So what do you make of that?
Well, that one is interesting. And look, back in 2017, President Trump imposed tariffs on China, and we were able to get some things done with those tariffs. This is a little different. President Trump ratcheted up the numbers. Chinese government said, look, we are not going to stand down, and they ratcheted up their numbers. We actually got them to a point where they're almost embargo states, where we were embargoing product. I mean, it was just too high. I believe both leaders realized neither country could sustain this, so they paused. The question is going to be what can be done in 90 days. I love that President Trump used this to bring them to the table. I do believe that China is being a little bit more tougher this time, and it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of it in the end. But we have 90 days. The markets have looked at this and said, hey, at least we know President Trump is willing to bring the tariffs down, which I think is a real key. We're at a trade war, really, with China, and it'll be interesting to see how this all nets out in 90 days.
Well, do you think he's going to stay tough? What do you expect a final deal will look like?
Knowing President Trump, we'll get a deal. I just don't know if it'll be everything we want. But remember, the best deals are the ones that both people walk away from the table not liking the deal.
What do you think will be best for the U.S.?
You know what? I think what we should fear more than anything is not as much how much we buy from China. Let's face it, the American consumer and the government spends money. They're buying product from China. They're buying things manufactured in China because they're cheaper. I always use the example, you can buy a candle right here in Ohio for $3.50 and get that same candle from China for $1.25. Well, there's a reason. And people still want to buy the $1.25 candle. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is our intellectual properties. When they come over here, they steal those intellectual properties, all the things they do to try and get an edge on the United States. If we can fix that, we can fix a lot going forward. And I think that has to be the real key, moving forward in any trade relationship we have with China.
Former Congressman Jim Renacci, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
As Memorial Day approaches in the U.S., my thoughts turn to Vietnam and the 50th anniversary of the end of that tragic war. 58,000 Americans were killed. 75,000 were severely disabled. As many as 800,000 of the 3 million who served there were affected by PTSD. Additionally, it's estimated that around 400,000 may have died from health issues related to exposure to Agent Orange. 50 years later, we must not forget our Vietnam veterans, many of whom are now elderly and still endure physical and emotional scars from their experiences. Much has changed in the relationship between Vietnam and the U.S. over the decades. Just ask Vietnam War veteran Paul Hazelton, who returned to Vietnam more than 50 years after he served there.
It was a war zone when I was here before, and undeveloped. You know, Way didn't have any high-rise buildings, but everywhere you went, you know it was occupied territory with our military. And now you just see the hustle and bustle and the industry, and it's just remarkable. I'm just glad that we're now trading and friendly with Vietnam, and I think both sides are benefiting from it.
Yes, both Vietnam and the United States are benefiting from close economic ties. In April, when significant U.S. tariffs against China were implemented, Chinese President Xi Jinping traveled to Hanoi to enter into a trade agreement with Vietnam. However, the United States and Vietnam now need each other more than ever to counter China's influence, especially in light of its military aggression in the South China Sea. During his visit to Saudi Arabia, President Trump spoke out about old wartime enemies and how they can become friends.
I believe it is God's job to sit in judgment, my job to defend America, and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do.
Yes, President Trump is echoing what many anti-Trump supporters were saying during the Vietnam War over 50 years ago. Remember the phrase, "All we're saying is give peace a chance"? Well, there's been too much war and bloodshed. And as Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. So let's pray for more peacemakers and peace in Ukraine, the Middle East, and elsewhere around the world. Peace through strength. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.